In this episode, we're going to be discussing how to awaken the lover archetype. The lover plays a very potent and powerful role in our psychology, as well as throughout our meaning and experiences of life. This is actually a very important stage of development for us men to integrate properly. Otherwise, it can lead to all manner of mishaps and confusion and bad choices in this realm of intimacy, love, and relationships. And an improper or an impartial, somehow partial integration of the lover archetype can lead to so much heartache and so much pain that it really pays for us to invest some time and energy into understanding the principles, the qualities, and this whole idea of the lover as a sort of character. And that can really help us to develop ourselves in a specific way that enables us to really flourish and really to experience the best that life has to offer in this realm of our lives. So today I'm going to be explaining the specific character traits of the lover, as well as some of the most important themes in the lover's journey of formation and development. I'm also going to give you guys a bunch of examples to really help you to understand and study this archetype, as well as very clear, actionable steps that you can actually take to start embodying the lover archetype in your everyday life. Now, this episode is a continuation from last week, in which we explored the hero archetype. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely watch that as well in combination with this episode, because they're extremely complementary. And in fact, there is this very powerful symbiotic relationship between the lover and the hero. We see this playing out in film and pop culture very, very often. And I'm going to give you my approach of synthesizing and combining these two archetypes a little bit later on in this episode. My name's Jasper Brown, and welcome to The Conscious Masculine. Now, this topic is very near and dear to my heart because I resonate a lot with the lover archetype. And in fact, somehow so much of my life has been about seeking romance and fulfillment and really finding that love story that my heart was calling for. And at the same time, I also walked face first into some of the major mistakes and stumbling blocks and shadow elements of the lover archetype, which really kept me very stuck and frustrated and led me down some dark roads because I wasn't able to fulfill this somehow archetypal yearning inside me to live this love story. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the necessary levels of development in certain areas to actually experience that love story in the harmonious way that I wanted to. And this is very important to understand, because so many of us want that ideal love story, but the conditions are not yet right within us in order to call it in, to find it, to create it, or to maintain that love story. Sometimes we get it, but we lose our grip on it, and it slips out of our grasp. The relationship fails, or we scare our partner away, or we just end up hurting each other, and that's extremely painful. So we want to try to understand what are the qualities we need to embody in order to actually have what we truly yearn for. And the lover archetype and understanding this can really give us a bit of a map and a blueprint for exactly how to do that. So this concept of archetypes was really popularized by Carl Jung, who believed that these symbols we could call them, originate from the collective unconscious mind, which is shared amongst all human beings. I talked about that in more depth last week. I'm just going to briefly gloss over it now. Archetypes are really this universal, somehow primordial symbol and pattern that reoccurs throughout culture and time, across generations, and it's like an ongoing motif that is repeated in the human experience because it's embedded somewhere deeply in our psyche. And the archetypes really represent somehow these fundamental paths that map out the human experience and really influence the way that we perceive and interact with the world. So they're very potent, and that's why studying them can be very powerful, because it really does give us a bit of a blueprint to understand these somehow repeated fundamental experiences that humans have. And so we can see those patterns playing out in our own life. We can also watch them and observe them out there in the world, in the collective space of humanity. And the reason it's so powerful is because loving and being in love represents some of the most profound and fulfilling experiences that we actually have in life. It also creates so much of the pain and the heartache and the confusion that we experience as we somehow grapple to understand and navigate this complex experience of being in relationships with others. So understanding the lover archetype can really help us to approach the relationships that we have, as well as our own inner experience of love, in a much more skillful and integrated way. So with that said, I want to start by giving you guys a deeper understanding of the core principles that underpin this archetype of the lover. So we'll start with a bit of an overview, and then I'll get much, much more specific. So the lover archetype is one of the most enchanting and vital archetypes in human storytelling and mythology. It represents this capacity for deep emotion, passion, sensuality, and connections with others as well as the world. This archetype is really central to many of the cultural myths and modern narratives that we see symbolizing this quest for love and beauty and unity. And the lover, he lives in this somehow effervescent present moment. He freely allows the flow of emotions and sensuality to run through his body. He is attractive, healthy, potent. He's playful. He's also very creative. And through his open heart, he somehow accesses and experiences this mystical union or oneness with life around him, and especially through his connection with others, and especially his lover. Really, the lover is seeking love as well as beauty and pleasure. It's this interconnection point between those three key qualities. He's also somehow integrated his animal, which means he's not afraid to allow his needs, his desires, and his passion to move through him and express into the world. The lover often shows up and manifests in life as the artist, the poet, the singer, the dancer, who basically expresses himself, all of himself somehow, through his artistic passion or his pursuit or his craft without any inhibition or shame. And that is one of his gift. Somehow the gift of his love is expressed through his art. And it's through that he's manifesting this beauty and finding pleasure in life. So now I'm going to give you some specific character traits and qualities of the lover archetype, just so we can understand this in a more nuanced way. So the lover is really symbolized by passion and sensuality. As a man, embracing passion and sensuality means being deeply in touch with your senses and your emotions. It's about experiencing life with a certain intensity and depth, fully engaging with your surroundings as well as the people in your life, whether it's through intimate moments with your partner or simply appreciating the pleasures of life. This principle really encourages you to live fully and in a very vibrant way. And we can see that in the embodiment of the lover. He's very passionate and sensual. He's also very sexually embodied as well. So the lover has this deep relationship with his own sexuality. He's comfortable in his body with nudity. He's not ashamed. He's not inhibited. And he's able, as a result of that, to both give and receive pleasure and love in equal measure. He delights somehow in offering himself in service to his beloved. And he rejoices in simply this act of giving as an act of service. He loves to give because simply the giving of happiness and joy and pleasure to his lover fills him with pleasure and joy and love himself. He's able to abandon himself to passion, and he knows how to create the trust and safety necessary to encourage his partner to do so too. He really views sexuality as a precious gift that he's able to give and also loves to receive. And that is one of the greatest joys of life. The lover really resonates with that in a very deep way and prioritizes that in his life. Connection and intimacy is the next quality. So the lover really somehow values deep, meaningful connections. For us men, that means really fostering close, intimate relationships that go beyond just physical attraction. It's not enough just to be focused on the body or the looks or the surface. We need to go much deeper than that. It's more about being emotionally open, vulnerable when necessary, really understanding your partner's needs and creating a profound sense of safety and belonging in your relationships. The lover also embodies creativity and self-expression. He's able to channel his emotions into creative pursuits. And that's really a key aspect of the lover, as we've talked about already. He is the artist, the creative, the dancer. He's able to play, and he enjoys the act of creating. Also because that is giving joy, it's giving happiness to others. So whether it's through music, art, writing, poetry, or any other form of creative expression, which really allows him to connect to his inner world and then share that abundance of depth and feeling and love with others and the world. And that really helps us as men to create these shared emotional experiences that resonate deeply. The lover is able to really transmute and direct his sexual energy, that potential that exists inside of him, and he uses that and infuses that into his creative pursuits. Which gives him a certain form of like erotic inspiration. It's almost as if his lover or the woman that he's with or his whatever his partner is his muse. And through his muse, he taps into this deep reservoir of energy inside of him, and then he transmits that out into the world in the form of his creativity. And that's one of his very special gifts. The lover also embodies a certain form of presence and mindfulness. A key characteristic of the lover is that he's able to be in the present moment. He's able to be fully present in his body, in his senses. And through that capacity, he's able to transmit his undivided attention to his partner. He's really able to appreciate the here and now. And this helps him to foster a much deeper sense of connection with others because he's able to maintain depth and presence. And that's really the key quality we need in order to be able to develop more meaningful relationships, healthier relationships, deeper relationships. So cultivating presence and mindfulness is key. The lover also embodies empathy and compassion, which are really crucial if we want to understand and share the feelings of others. For us men, that means offering support, kindness, a genuine care for your partner's well-being as well as their feelings and needs. We need to be able to not just relate from a mental point of view and say that we understand what our partner is feeling, but we need to be able to actually feel it. Empathy is really being able to put ourselves in their shoes and not just relate mentally, but to actually feel what they feel. Because only then do we actually truly understand or truly care in the deepest possible way. And really, our partner can feel that. Women are particularly attuned to being able to feel that. And that's why there is a lot of complaint about men being stuck in their heads, because they don't drop out of their head and into their heart. Because empathy and compassion really is a quality that emerges from the heart. Romance is the next quality of the lover. The lover really has this feel for the romantic story, which is his life unfolding. He's really looking to express this attitude and this quality, this romantic essence within him with his beloved. And through his relationship, he seeks to manifest a very refined, very beautiful expression of the love that he feels deep inside of him. He somehow wants to express that love just for love's sake. Not with an agenda, not with a hidden, like, I'll give you this, but you need to give me something in return. He feels that love and he wants to express the gift of that love for its own sake. And because it delights in the eyes of his lover and gives her this precious gift of happiness and this beautiful experience of being loved by such a man. And that is in a certain way one of his greatest gifts. So those are the harmonious qualities expressed by the lover that I wanted to give you guys. Now let's look at some of the disharmonies that can also arise if this process of formation is somehow incomplete or corrupted by trauma and wounding. If you want to understand trauma and wounding in a much deeper way, I've just done a 2-part series on the wounded masculine. It's definitely worth going and checking out. So, the shadows of the lover archetype, the first of which we can broadly call the addict. He really avoids his emotions. He tries to fill the emptiness inside of him by consuming experiences, endless work, money, food, drugs, adrenaline kicks. These are his way to reach a certain limited freedom. It's his attempt to experience a certain endless orgasm. That's his unconscious search for wholeness, which in a certain way corrupts and possesses him, and it can often even destroy him. And we can see that in this archetype of the addict, the shadow archetype. And we can really understand that the addict is always trying to fill this deep void, somehow avoiding the pain by covering it up with these shallow, cheap experiences which take away the pain for a brief time. And in understanding that, this is really worth examining our own behavior and potential addictions that we might have, which are actually preventing us from awakening the lover archetype in a much more harmonious way. Now, this could be things like porn, obviously, is one of the major ones. Porn is obviously going to suck our energy and that beautiful erotic inspiration and the romantic inspiration that we have inside of us, and it just takes it down. It has a very addictive quality that sucks our energy in and also degrades the quality of purity that we can attach to our love and to our sexuality. Now, it doesn't necessarily always do this, but it has a very strong tendency to do this because porn has a very addictive quality and it's a slippery slope. Once we're hooked in, one thing leads to another. We keep chasing the dopamine and, it starts off fairly vanilla, but as it's been shown in many, many studies that it's a slippery slope and it goes down, and that's how guys wind up looking at stuff they never thought they would, because it really plays on the shadows that exist inside of us, the frustrations, the anger, the dark fantasies that we have, which we never got to express in a healthy way. That's a way for us to get a certain access to that without any cost. It's something free. We can just look at it. We get access to it, but it doesn't cost us anything. We don't have to invest anything socially. We don't have to build anything. We don't have to create the safety or commitment with a woman to really experience those things. And that can really corrupt our expression of the lover archetype. We also have things like video games, alcohol, drugs, social media, any form of addiction can be used in a certain way to cope or escape what we have inside. And if we have an unhealthy relationship to these mediums, then there's usually, it becomes a coping mechanism which we then rely on instead of having to sit with the uncomfortable feelings, because basically underneath that addictive pattern is something that we're trying to cover up, hide, or reject. Is it our fear of abandonment? Is it the fear of rejection? The depression? the lack of intimacy that we feel, or the fear of intimacy. Perhaps it's a toxic shame or an inability to truly sit with and process the depth of pain that we feel. Whatever the case, we need to interrupt this pattern and stop avoiding the uncomfortable truth and basically try to see what is underneath that. If we're to ever escape these addictive patterns, we need a way out. Just the fact that we have an addiction of some, it's even difficult to admit, but that's a very important place to start, is that I have this addictive relationship to this. You know, for the decades I was using and watching porn, I never admitted to myself that it was an addiction. For the decades that I was smoking weed, I never admitted to myself that it was I was in denial of the fact that I was addicted. But when I was able to actually zoom out and see it objectively, and especially in hindsight, I'm able to look at those patterns and be like, yeah, I was definitely addicted. So it's really important to be able to acknowledge the fact that we might have an unhealthy relationship to something, and we might be using it to cope or to avoid or to numb ourselves. So that's a crucial step. The next shadow of the lover is what we could call the depressed or the wounded lover, and he is stuck in painful emotions. He's withdrawn from the world. And this happens especially when his love fails to land. He has a relationship that explodes or falls apart. He was chasing his beloved and trying to win her heart, and she rejected him or left him for someone else. When this happens, he can become very jaded, very resentful, very bitter. Sometimes this manifests as a certain vengeful attitude towards his partner or ex-partners, and he instinctively somehow lashes out and projects his pain outwards. He might even start holding a grudge or blaming, all women collectively, and we can see that a lot these days, especially in the online space. There is this kind of very antagonistic relationship between a lot of men and women who have had bad experiences and then simply use those bad experiences to categorize all men as toxic, or all women are gold diggers who don't give a shit about men's feelings, this kind of thing. A man in this situation can often end up shutting down his creative expression. He no longer has the confidence to put himself out there. And he does this in order to protect himself behind his armor, a certain armor that he adopts, the armor of indifference. I don't care. It's not worth it. What's the point? I'm better off by myself. Women just use you. And it's this certain form of apathy which really cuts him off from the joy and the spark of life. And because of that, he feels separate, isolated, alone. And he marinates in that depressive kind of state. And he loses his libido. He no longer has that fire, that passion. And we've got to remember that emotions like depression and resentment, this is the body's way of actually signaling to us that something is out of balance. There's always a deeper message behind the emotions that we feel, or the states that are within us. When I look at the times in my life when I was depressed or resentful or bitter, It was when things were really not going well, where I just wasn't where I wanted to be. And so those experiences of heavy emotional states was my body's way of communicating for me to snap out of it. And it was the pain that I was in which eventually motivated me to actually act. And once I went through that, I started to really listen. I started to be grateful that my body was talking to me and giving me these cues, giving me these deeper insights and speaking to me in a certain way, which is the power of emotional intelligence. I've also done a whole episode on how to develop emotional intelligence. You can definitely check that out if you're interested in this. It's extremely important, especially if we want to awaken the lover archetype. We need to have a good, very intimate connection with this inner language of the body. And if you find yourself stuck in depression, if you're bitter and resentful and you're jaded towards women or relationships and you have this apathetic, depressive state, this is a wake-up call. This is your chance to slap yourself out of it. Look in the mirror, see where you fucked up, and what you need to do in order to pull yourself out of that. Because life is too precious and too short to stay stuck there. Now, the lover archetype is also often plagued by various inner states that can really corrupt his ability to live that love story, that vibrant romantic love story that he longs for. Now I'm going to give you guys some specific character traits and things that we can observe and pinpoint to make this even more obvious than I've made it already. The first one is possessiveness and obsessiveness. Passion and that yearning that we feel inside can sometimes turn into a need for control, a fear of losing something can cause us to grab onto it and hold it too tightly, leading to a certain obsessive need to possess that partner, that person, this woman, the relationship. So it's really important that we recognize when our desire for connection actually becomes a fear of losing. And we need to figure out how to address those feelings in a healthy way instead of succumbing to those, because a partner that you have to control or somehow possess, this is a very attached and it's not love. It's really not love. It's something else. It's a corruption because of our attachment and our fears instead of a beautiful gift that we get to give this person and also receive in a reciprocal manner. That leads us to the next one, which is jealousy and insecurity. Now, the deep emotional bond that we can create with someone can sometimes, and perhaps very often even, lead to a certain insecurity when it comes up against the threat of losing that person. And those feelings can, if they're not addressed in a healthy way, cause emotional turmoil and damage to the relationship. It's really important that we actually build enough self-confidence and trust in the relationship that it actually allows us to have a conversation about those feelings, to express those feelings, to find strategies and compromises and agreements within the relationship to deal with these kind of shadow qualities and feelings that might arise. I've certainly been through enough jealousy in my own relationship, and that happened especially when we were in insecure attachment. When we didn't have the stable base of the relationship and we were playing games with each other, we were threatening to see other people. We were even talking or having relationships outside the relationship and leaking energy, which obviously created a lot of room for jealousy to come in, because there was a certain insecurity there. And through that process, we actually realized, of course, that is very unhealthy, and we need to be able to treat each other with much more respect and to talk about those feelings when they arose so they could be processed in a healthy way. The next shadow quality is dependency and self-neglect. So when we rely too heavily on our partner for emotional fulfillment, this can really lead to a state of dependency or codependency, when both of you are basically like enmeshed and stuck in a sort of hungry, addictive need, using the relationships to somehow fill an emptiness inside of you. And if anything comes along that threatens that, it's extremely destabilizing. It's also really important that we maintain our own sense of identity within a relationship and really take care of our individual needs, and to make sure that we're not like abandoning ourselves for the relationship. And that's something I've definitely been guilty of in the past, is clinging on and staying in a relationship for the idea of the relationship instead of the reality, and seeing the reality, which was that my needs were not getting met. I was deeply unhappy. I was feeling emotionally neglected or abused in the relationship. So it's really important that we have a very profound state of connection to our needs in order that we don't abandon ourselves to the relationship, because that will end up killing the relationship anyway. It's also important to avoid or to not approach relationships in this way of like it's an escapism or a certain like rose-tinted glasses, a certain idealism. And if we focus too much on the beauty and the pleasure that the relationship brings us, sometimes this can lead to a certain form of escapism or idealism. We need to avoid placing unrealistic expectations on the relationship and actually stay grounded and in reality, to prevent ourselves from falling into disappointment and disillusionment. This happens a lot, especially when we put our partner on this pedestal, or we create a lot of fancy kind of new age romantic ideals, like we're twin flames, we're soul mates, we've been together for many lifetimes, and therefore in this lifetime we have to live attached at the hip forever. I'll be with you from this life until the next, and this can be like an unrealistic expectation to place on a relationship, and you've just met each other. Very easy in the beginning of the relationship when we have this infatuation stage. It's very easy to lose our grounding and to get caught up and swept up in the rush of emotions and the feeling of, finally, I have this perfect person that's going to fulfill all of my romantic dreams. And then 2 weeks later, it falls apart because she's going back to her country, or you live in different places, or then it's long distance, or she has another boyfriend, or she doesn't, she gets freaked out because you're too gung-ho. So it's really important that we stay grounded and not lose ourselves in this excessive idealism, which the lover archetype can be very prone to, because he invests so much in that experience of love and romance and the relationship that he just basically, it consumes him. And on the escapism side, it can be he's doing that in order to avoid the discomfort inside of him. And we see this especially in people who jump from one relationship to the next. They have a long relationship, it breaks up, horrible breakup, they're heartbroken, but then, 2 weeks later, they're off with someone new. And they're using relationships to avoid actually confronting and feeling the pain and looking in the mirror and seeing where they fucked up. So that's a form of escapism, which is very common. The next shadow element is a lack of boundaries. So really this intense burning desire to have the relationship and the ideal relationship can really blur the lines of our personal boundaries. It's really important that we actually maintain a balance between giving and receiving love. I think a lot of us can be pretty guilty of that, especially when we're not so experienced in relationships. We tend to overgive, or relationships can be unbalanced, one person giving much more than the other, and that creating a lot of problems. Really, we need to be able to ensure that our own well-being is not sacrificed for the sake of the relationship. I've certainly been very guilty of a lack of boundaries in relationships, which at the end of the day, it destroyed the love. It eroded the love. It was like a cancer in the relationship because it just built up resentment because I didn't know how to ask for my needs. My needs were getting neglected. I was self-abandoning. I didn't know how to have those difficult conversations. When I did have those conversations, it went horribly. So I wound up in this vicious kind of cycle of my needs weren't getting met. I would go and make even more efforts in trying to get them met, and then they would still not be met. And and it's this like vicious loop, all because of this certain ideal that we place on the relationship, or we put that person on a pedestal, or we've agreed to a certain structure or standard of relationship which actually doesn't suit us. And that's extremely common. And it takes quite a bit of work to actually get in touch with what your boundaries are, how to communicate those in a healthy way, what to do if your boundaries are not honored or respected by the person that you're around. All of this takes actual work to develop. And that's something I go into a lot more depth in my online courses, my men's community. We talk about this a lot. And that's a long-term project, is to really understand that in a much deeper way. And I'll have future episodes about boundaries and how to create them. And we've also got the next category, which is sexual dysfunction. This is a manifestation of the shadows of the lover, which reflects in a certain feeling of being inhibited sexually. The shadows of toxic shame, in which he is like beating himself up excessively, degrading himself, seeing himself as unworthy, unlovable, ugly, repugnant. Often this is the repercussions of certain trauma that we have experienced in our life, either from childhood, from our teenage years, going through puberty, or from past relationships. The lover struggles to control his sexual energy, which then leaks out in various ways. This might be in the form of premature ejaculation. Maybe he is experiencing erectile dysfunction, where he has a certain disconnection from his ability to control his sexual energy. And because of that disconnection, this leaves him feeling powerless, ashamed, inhibited, afraid of getting rejected or shamed or shunned or judged by his partner. And as a result of that, his relationship to his sexual energy becomes somewhat deviant, somewhat hidden, Perhaps this comes out in manipulative or addictive ways. He might resort to pornography instead of getting his needs met in a healthy way. He prioritizes quick gratification instead of doing the difficult, uncomfortable, emotionally laborious work to create meaningful connections or commitment, or to start the healing process and to find a lover that actually is on the same wavelength as him and is conscious enough to support his healing journey. And my own shadows and undeveloped sides of myself led me to embodying many of those aspects of the lover, those shadows. I certainly struggled with premature ejaculation in my life. I've experienced erectile dysfunction in my life. I had a very acute lack of boundaries. I was unrealistic in my expectations, and I failed to see the romantic reality of the situations that I was in, especially in my earlier relationships. I abandoned and neglected my own needs in the relationships, and a lot of those problems took me many, many years to overcome. Most of which was made so much harder because I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't have this map that I'm now presenting to you. I didn't have the ability to communicate what was going on. Most of this was happening at a very subconscious level because I was so contracted, because I was stuck, because I didn't know. I was so ashamed or so afraid of getting rejected, abandoned, judged, criticized, that kind of froze me in a certain form of coping pattern and holding pattern, which can just end up looping for years or decades or the rest of your life. So the invitation here is to obviously start to confront this and start making progress. I hope this list that I've given you about these qualities, both the positive and the negatives, has really given you some clues and pointers to see what you need to focus on, what you need to avoid, and what this work actually starts to look like. The lover archetype is very complex and profound in its ability to shape our lives and our relationships. It offers this very potent path of development for those of us who wish to experience and live a vibrant, passionate, healthy love story in our lives. So with that said, now I want to give you guys 10 practical steps to help you awaken the lover archetype. The first of which is to connect with your senses. It's really important that we actually engage in activities that heighten our sensory awareness and experience. Such things like enjoying a meal and actually tasting your food, slowing down and consciously approaching the process of eating. Taking time out just to listen to music and enjoying the sound. Spending time in nature is one of my personal favorite ways to connect to my senses. I go up and sit by the lake and just watch the birds and walk around in a very mindful, present state. And actually this brings, so many times this for me has brought this ecstatic experience of being in the present moment. Just watching nature unfolding before your eyes and somehow being so alive, so present, so immersed in the beauty and the mystery of life. This really helped me a lot to detach from my problems and come back to a much more spiritual state, a much more present and embodied and alive state, which actually enhanced my capacity to show up in my relationship and experience the love. So it's really important that we actually Make it a practice, make it a focus in your life on a daily basis, even if it's 5 minutes standing outside, looking at the trees and listening to the birds. Or we could take it into a much deeper way and, go for a 2-hour walk in nature. Not a walk to get to the destination, but a walk to enjoy the journey somehow. That leads me to the next step, which is practicing mindfulness in general. You could apply everything I just said as an approach towards mindfulness. It's just really this capacity to stay present and fully engage yourself in the moment. Sharpening that capacity just pays off dividends forever in your relationships with not just others, but also yourself. So having some form of mindfulness practice is just crucial if you want to awaken and develop the lover archetype, because the lover he's immersed in the mystery of the present moment. The next step is to cultivate empathy. We need to make an actual concerted effort to share and understand the feelings of others, which means we need to learn how to listen actively. We need to show a certain compassion, and we need to be able to offer emotional support. So we need to develop our own emotional intelligence in order to develop empathy. Because the lover is connected, and empathy is what allows us to connect, not just on a mental level, but on a felt, experiential level, on a deeper, emotional, intimate level. So that's super crucial. The next step is to express your creativity. We want to actually engage in activities that allow us to express our emotions, our sexual energy, that romance that we feel inside, and connect it out into the world and evoke it in our inner world. This can include writing, painting, dancing, poetry, playing music, anything. One of my ways is connecting through this medium. This is one of my ways of creativity. I sit down for hours, I meditate, I write, I journal, I contemplate, and then I craft these episodes. This is one of my gifts. And that's why it lights me up. That's why I come with this certain energy. That's why I transmit this depth within me, this love that I feel. I want to give it. I want to express it. I want to transmit it in a way that it's valuable, that other people find beautiful and meaningful and moving. That's just an example. There's a million other examples, and you need to find your own unique expression. And through that expression, you are actively cultivating the qualities of the lover. Because then when you actually approach a woman or you develop a relationship, you bring this capacity, you bring this effervescence, this aliveness, this mysterious inner depth. You bring that and you offer that as a gift. And of course, that is going to captivate and inspire and attract others. Because it's special, it's something unique. It's something profoundly you. And it's something only you can do in your unique way. So cultivate that. Have a practice. Have a passion or something that really brings this side and develops this side of you. It's very powerful. The next step is to build deeper connections. So we actually need to invest time and energy in building deep, meaningful relationships around us. We need to be open, we need to be honest, we need to be vulnerable with the people that we care about, and we need to actually invest significant attention, time, and energy into developing those relationships. Relationships don't just build themselves. You actually need to put stuff into it in order to actually grow the connection. And deep connections they're an investment. It's not just, it's like, oh, I have to, I need to nurture this relationship. It's not, no, that relationship is like, it's like investing shares in a company. It's going to keep paying you dividends over time because you gain a profound friendship, a profound intimate connection, a profound love for each other. And that is one of the best parts of life. That's why we're here in many ways, to experience the complexity and the depth of ourself reflected through another. And in the eyes of another, especially when we have a deep, intimate connection and a profound depth between you, the other is able to reflect so much of what they see in you. And so it's this virtuous loop, you transmit all of the beautiful things that you see in them, and they reflect all of the beautiful, magical, mysterious things that they see in you. And thereby you gain this beautiful reciprocation effect, which helps both of you to experience a deep appreciation of yourself in a deeper way and this other person in a fascinating way. So we need to prioritize that and actually invest in those kinds of relationships and seek out and surround ourselves with people of a certain caliber and quality, because that will shape so much of how your life unfolds and so much of how you grow as a person. The next step is to embrace vulnerability. I know a lot of guys hate to hear this, but recognizing that vulnerability is actually a strength, not a weakness. Of course, on the superficial level, yes, vulnerability is a weakness. It's a point that you can be exposed. But within that exposure, it's like a trade-off. It's not just a pure weakness. It's through stripping off some of our armor that we allow others in to see deeper inside of us. And as I've talked about in the previous example of deep connections and relationships, it's impossible to create a truly deep, meaningful connection with anyone without vulnerability. Because vulnerability allows you to expose your deepest stuff. And when you expose your deepest stuff to another, as long as it's with the right other, I'm not saying do this with just anyone you find. You need to actually build the depth and the trust and the empathy in order to do this. You also need to develop the confidence and the belief in yourself that no matter what happens, even if this other person one day betrays you and uses that vulnerability against you, you know you're strong enough to take it. You know it's not going to kill you, and that you will actually grow through the experience and you actually have nothing to lose. And it's through exposing ourselves to experiences like this that we really allow ourselves to open up, to truly love, to experience joy. And even if we do experience pain, that's part of life. And pain teaches us. It's a powerful teacher. It's one of the most powerful teachers. Why do you think we feel pain when we burn our finger on a fire or a hot kettle? It's to teach us, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe there's something there that is threatening to me. So it has always very profound lessons, profound wisdom in the experiences of pain, not just physical, but also emotional, mental, psychological pain. All of this has a very profound wisdom imbued within it. The next step is to celebrate beauty. The lover is able to appreciate beauty in the world around him. And this can be, of course, through things like art and creative endeavors, also in nature, in the world, even in the creation of material stuff like the construction of this house or the place where you live or the city that you're in. Sometimes when I'm driving around the city, I love to drive. I love to listen to music while I'm driving and get myself in a very flow, meditative, contemplative state. I'm sometimes with my jaw dropped, just looking at the world. Just sometimes I've had tears in my eyes at seeing a beautiful sunset or cars driving around and looking at these humans like little ants constructing and building and going about their lives. It's like somehow this, they say that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And if we cultivate this eye for beauty, that is deeply enriching for our life. Because it touches something, it touches something like a profound fabric of reality in a certain way. There's beauty everywhere. There's beauty in your fucking drink bottle, in a pen, in your hand in front of your face. If you have the eyes to see it. There's even beauty in a dog shit on the side of the road if you're able to look deeper than the surface, look deeper than your own mental categorizations or the smell that you can detect in your nose. There's beauty in death. I lost my father quite recently, and despite the pain and the heartache and the tragedy of that moment for me, it was also profoundly touching and beautiful. The depth of what it generated in me to feel this heartache, this love, this connection, this investment, so much time with this amazing man in my life who was, the main, the main man in my life. It evokes so much beauty inside of me just to feel what he meant to me and who he was to me. So the more that we cultivate and celebrate that beauty, the more enriched our life becomes, the more special everything is. And it's one of the best investments you can make. Because it deepens your relationship with people, with everything, with your everyday, your every moment can become something special when you can see the beauty that underpins it. The next step is to nurture yourself and others. It's really important that you take care of your own emotional and physical needs, and we want to develop the capacity to extend that care to others. Acts of kindness and self-care are really essential characteristics of the lover archetype, because that's a quality of love. Love protects. Love respects. Love honors. Love is devotion. And if you're devoted to something, you take care of it as if it's a part of yourself. Because it is a part of yourself. Something that you identify with so wholeheartedly, you treat it as a part of you. You don't need to change it or pressure it or manipulate it to be any other way. You are kind. You are caring, compassionate, free from judgment and manipulation. And that applies to ourselves, to be kind and compassionate and caring towards ourselves and to love ourselves. That's actually a very profound path. And I'll definitely have a future episode on this because it's something people misunderstand and get very wrong and confused. And this is something essential. And the person that can embody the lover archetype takes this very seriously. Because if you don't love yourself, it's very hard to love or take care truly of someone else. And eventually your lack of love for yourself will inhibit or corrupt your ability to love others. And it will have a negative repercussion. You'll start to build resentment. You'll get frustrated. You'll feel I'm doing so much for others, but they don't do so much for me. And that's because you've been overgiving. So it's really worth understanding that and observing that in yourself and in others to understand it more deeply. The next quality is to seek balance. The lover strives for a certain balance between giving and receiving, which flows on perfectly from what I just said. We need to ensure that our relationships are reciprocal. They're even. They're healthy. Because in the absence of reciprocity, things get out of whack. Things get dysfunctional. Things get toxic. And we can find ourselves falling into these shadows that I've talked about already. Balance is super crucial. And the lover, when he is harmoniously integrated, is able to modulate his needs with the needs of others. He's able to articulate and express himself in such a way that enables his side to get seen and understood, and he's able to advocate for his boundaries. And at the same time, he's also deeply respectful, deeply caring, deeply empathetic with others, and he's able to modulate and weigh the conditions, the qualities, the things that are happening in his life. And he's, that is in a certain way a function of wisdom. Wisdom is able to see the proper priorities and to look and see the bigger picture and understand what needs to occur. And it's really important that we develop the wisdom to be able to live a balanced life. This is essential for health. It's essential for relationships. It's essential for our spiritual development. It's essential for work, to have a proper work-life balance. And it's through that balance that we avoid so many of the shadow elements that can creep in and disrupt things or corrupt things. Now, the 10th step is to reflect and integrate. We need to regularly reflect on our experiences. There's a deep tendency in life, because things happen so fast, so much stuff happens, and our memory is limited, and we're somehow rushing from one thing to the next, that we fail to actually give ourselves the time to reflect. This really hit home for me when I first did my first solo meditation retreat in the wilderness, where I spent 5-6 days alone for the first time in my life. And that was the first time when I really understood how much catching up I had to do. Because for the first 3-4 days, I was just literally thinking about everything that had happened in the weeks, months, and years prior. There was so much for my mind to process. It was so busy. It was really hard for me to meditate properly, because I was just like catching up on all of the shit that I had not processed. And after those few days of really processing everything, then I was like, then I could see it. Here comes this thing again. I've already dealt with that. Let it go. And that really allowed me to integrate things in a much deeper way. And then the second half of the retreat was fire. Profound, crazy states of, extremely deep meditation and very blissful, ecstatic insights and revelations. Especially in this area of relationships and intimacy and love and romance, the lessons that we experience are so important, so key. And if we just jump from one relationship to the next, or we get stuck in a kind of victim mentality in which we're just blaming or judging or criticizing them, we miss this incredible opportunity to understand what that meant for us, what we need to grow and to develop in order to avoid repeating the same mistakes again in the future. We need to make sure we integrate the lessons we actually learn in life, such to the point that we are actually continually growing and evolving and developing our capacity to love and getting better. So the experiences we're not just looping in kind of negative cycles, or we're not stuck. So reflection and integration, this should be a part of your daily, weekly practice. That's why meditation is so crucial, because it actually gives you time to sit in your mind and reflect on your thoughts and actually see things. Journaling, contemplation with a journal is super crucial. Get everything out of here which is jumbled up in your mind, get it out onto the page so you can see it. And that will help you to reflect. Then you can read it and you can process it in a different way. These are crucial skills and practices we need to turn into habits, and that will rapidly improve the quality of our life as well as our relationships. Now, I want to give you guys a bonus way to study and emulate the lover archetype, because you've made it this far. And this is one of my personal favorite ways, actually, which is to study and emulate the archetype of the lover in film. So obviously there is millions of romantic films out there where we can see this lover archetype very beautifully portrayed. And by watching and embodying, watching the lover in these films, in these love stories, we can learn so much. And this can be a very, very powerful way for us to resonate with the lover. And we can learn a lot of powerful lessons about how to approach things in a specific way. So I'm going to give you guys 3 examples of popular films where we can watch and learn something from the lover. So the first one is Jack Dawson from the Titanic. Very archetypal love story. Now, Jack really embodies the lover so beautifully in the Titanic with his passionate and very spontaneous love for Rose. It's really this very deep emotional and physical connection with her that allows them to transcend the social norms and boundaries that are established in that, and they basically break the conventions in service of their love, even though it's for a very short time. It's very deep, very, very like legendary. Jack is also a creative. He's artistic, and he has that very adventurous, like carefree, wild spirit somehow, which he's able to share with Rose, and that culminates in their very effervescent, very beautiful and profound love story. Despite it being tragic, it's something that can definitely bring some tears to your eyes. So studying this is such a beautiful way to resonate with the lover in this very pure way. The next example, which I really love, is Jamie Fraser from Outlander. Outlander is the Scottish time travel adventure series. And this man, Jamie Fraser, really epitomizes the lover archetype through this very deep, emotional, physical connection with Claire. And this was given to me, this this archetype was given to me in a certain way by my partner, who is a massive Outlander fan, and she recommended that I watch Outlander because she's like, this guy gets it. This guy, like, if you can emulate these qualities, this is what women want. So at her invitation, I went and started to watch the Outlander series. We ended up watching the whole thing together. And yeah, I was very touched, very inspired by this extremely masculine representation of the lover. He's also what I would call has this very, anyway, he's a very complex character. He has this very harmonious integration of also the king archetype, also the warrior archetype, the hero. So he's complex and displays in a certain way this very, very profound masculine qualities in a very balanced, harmonious way, which I have taken a lot of inspiration from in my work and in my relationship. And it's really helped me to see how to balance certain qualities, how to balance a certain masculine potency and aggression and like that inner animal, but also balanced, like tempered in a certain way with this more emotional, intuitive, empathetic, caring, loving side, and how there's this way to actually combine the two of those, which is deeply polarizing for a woman. So I highly recommend studying Jamie Fraser from Outlander, because you can get a lot of inspiration from him. And the last example is Noah from The Notebook. I love this film. It touches my heart very deeply every time I watch this. And Noah really embodies and epitomizes this like passionate, dedicated love for his beloved Allie. And yeah, he rebuilds the house that he promised to Allie, and he spends years and years building it, even though they're not even in connection at that time. She's actually with another man, and he is like devoted, dedicated, never gives up on their love. Like he is like so total in his commitment to their love and winning her back that even though she's got this rich, handsome, successful guy, she chooses Noah because of that lover in him, that like essence, like the love in him it just fucking rocks you to imagine yourself living that and making those sacrifices. And I think that's such a beautiful quality in the lover is he's willing to sacrifice for love. And we can learn a lot from Noah and the way that he embodies the lover in The Notebook. And especially, the whole story is carried on the back of this. He's actually taking care of her she has Alzheimer's. She doesn't remember who he is. And he's, telling the story. And I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but it's extremely beautiful, especially the ending. So those are the 3 examples that I wanted to give you guys to go out there and study. I could have given you 50 more. There's so many. So I really encourage this way of sharing this, watching these kind of films with your beloved, having conversations about the characters in the film, what you liked about them, what they did right, what they did wrong, and starting to resonate and put yourself in connection and starting to emulate the characters and especially their qualities that they're expressing. So that's it for this episode. We've explored the concept of the lover archetype. We've really focused on the specific qualities and shadows that the lover can manifest. And I've given you guys a 10-step process for awakening the lover archetype within yourself and within your own life. I hope you guys found this insightful and useful. It's something that lights me up because, as I said, I really resonate with the lover. It's something we also focus a lot, the representation and embodiment of the archetypes in the conscious masculine, my men's community. I've just gone through a launch process. I've got 65 men inside the group, a lot of new guys coming in, and it's really buzzing. And I'm really loving watching that unfold and grow, and the men inside supporting each other's growth and transformation. It's just epic. So if that resonates with you and you like this kind of content, I really encourage you guys to come and join us. It's so amazing and so powerful to be surrounded by other men who are doing this kind of work. And we meet every week, twice a week, for group calls. So come and join the Brotherhood. I'll be launching and preparing a new course soon it's actually the first course that I've built, but I'm rebuilding it. And that is called The Legendary Lover, which is really around the combination of these two archetypes, the lover, the hero, and the lover. And giving us both the empathy, the emotional awareness, the passionate sensuality, combined with this fierce, determined commitment and leadership that the lover truly embodies, that the hero truly embodies, and this beautiful synergy that comes together to form the legendary lover, who has a certain masterful control over his sexual energy. He's fiercely devoted, he's open and empathetic, and he's courageous and devoted in his approach towards love and relationships. So that's in the process of being rebuilt, and I'm going to be launching that again in the months to come. So I'm looking forward to bringing that into the community as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave some feedback, a comment, a rating on the podcast, or subscribe to my channel on YouTube. It really, really helps me to grow, and I'm super appreciative of any and all feedback at this stage. It is early days. I think this is episode 13, so I'm really hungry for feedback, and it really helps me a lot to improve every episode, to know what is landing, what you guys need more of, just that I'm on the right track as well with all of this. It really it gives me a lot to feel that support. So thank you for those of you who have as well. And I'm going to leave you guys with a final couple of insights, as always. Remember, the archetypes offer us a certain map, right? It's basically like an avenue of development that has been repeated millions or billions of times in the human experience. That's what makes it archetypal. It's somehow ingrained in the human psyche. And that's why we can follow it. It's like a blueprint. And with this in mind, we can actually really start to embody the lover very consciously in order to integrate the specific character qualities and traits and the story, the love story that the archetype represents. And in doing so, we get to experience one of the fundamental joys in life, the experience of falling in love and being in love, giving love and receiving love. And this goes way beyond just satisfying our own needs for validation, curing our loneliness, or giving us a nice story to tell our grandchildren one day. If we want to get somewhere special and meaningful and profound in life, we need to learn how to love. And the best way to do that is to find someone who inspires that state within us. and then to practice and devote ourselves to loving them completely and in a balanced, harmonious way. We want to become so masterful in loving one person that we can then start expanding that out to others. Eventually, we can develop the ability to love not just one person, but lots of people, or perhaps even all people, as well as the entirety of the world. And if we are dedicated and devoted on this path, eventually we will start to love the entirety of existence. This path of love leads to transpersonal love. We can take it from the human love and start with the human love, and we can go beyond that. We can transcend the human capacity to love, and we can go into the certain experience of divine love. A love which touches all things in equal measure, which is one of the most special and life-changing realizations that you can possibly have. I just wanted to express that it's possible. I have had this realization, and I want to help you guys to have that realization as well. It's obviously a very deep topic that I'm not going to go too deeply into now. I'll definitely create a future episode exploring this in much more depth. But for now, you can start putting the steps that I've given you today into practice to go out there and awaken the lover archetype.